The hose slipped in my hand, spraying too long at the roots, as I heard my son's voice cut through the afternoon stillness. "She won't be living here long anyway," he told the landscaper, like I was a line item already crossed off. The September sun was warm, but the air around me turned sharp, heavy, unrecognizable. My own child had declared me temporary in the home I built. That's when I knew. Before they could bury me alive, I'd bury their inheritance first. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. The hose trembles slightly in Evelyn's hand as she moves along the front hedge, watering each root base with practiced care. The September sun is low but warm, filtering through the last green leaves of the maples that guard the edge of the property. The grass smells like it's holding on, clinging to summer. Tom Reynolds straightens up from where he's been edging near the old oak, sweat clinging to his neck. "That should do it, Mrs. Carter," he says, nodding toward the trimmed walkway. He's worked this yard every other Saturday for years, enough to know every shrub like a friend. Evelyn nods with a gentle smile. "Looks good, Tom. You're careful." He's about to collect his tools when Michael's voice slices across the stillness. "You might want to leave those hedges a little shorter next time," Michael says, sauntering down the front steps with a smug grin. "We're thinking about clearing the whole thing out next season. Make it easier for a buyer." Tom freezes. He looks up slowly, blinking like maybe he misheard. Behind Michael, Laura steps onto the porch, coffee mug in hand. "Seriously," she chimes in, not even pretending to lower her voice. "We could get 6 figures easy, maybe more if someone wants to demo and rebuild. Prime lot." Tom's gaze flicks to Evelyn. She hasn't moved, just shifts the hose slightly to the next hydrangea, the water now pooling too long at the base. "She won't be living here long anyway," Michael adds with a short laugh. "Might as well start prepping it, right?" The air thickens. Tom clears his throat and mutters, "Didn't know you two were in real estate." Michael shrugs. "We're exploring options." "Exploring?" Tom hears that word like a blade. The house behind Evelyn isn't just a structure. He knows she raised her son here. He remembers the blue ribbons from the county fair vegetables she grew out back. Hell, he even remembers when she still kept a flag out front every summer, back before the pole rested. Evelyn turns off the hose. Laura's already walked back inside, distracted by a phone buzzing. Michael lingers, eyes drifting lazily across the yard like a man surveying something he thinks he already owns. A soft sound pulls Tom's attention, the creak of a bike wheel. Sophie. She glides up the driveway, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair wine-tossed, her expression dimming the moment she clocks her father's posture. The silence in the air. The way Evelyn's knuckles grip the garden hose. Michael offers a lazy wave. "Hey, kiddo." Sophie ignores him and heads straight to her grandmother. "You okay?" she asks under her breath. Evelyn nods once, then leans down to loosen a stubborn root clogging the spigot. Tom takes a beat, then gathers his trimmer and rake. Before he leaves, he pauses beside Sophie, voice low, just for her. "Call your grandmother later," he says. "She's not to be written off." Their eyes meet. Something solid passes between them. Understanding, unspoken loyalty. He walks away, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots the only sound for a few moments. Evelyn straightens, wipes her hands on her apron, and surveys the trimmed lawn. The house behind her is quiet now. Michael's shadow moves across an upstairs window. She doesn't look up. Instead, she picks up the garden hose, coils it slowly, methodically. Like someone who just filed a mental document and knows exactly where to retrieve it when the time comes. Then she turns toward the porch. The house hums low with that kind of silence particular to late afternoon. After the noise, before the next move. Evelyn steps into her bedroom and closes the door behind her with a soft click. The curtains are drawn halfway. The edge of sunlight drapes across the foot of the bed, just touching the old cedar chest like an invitation. She kneels, slower than she used to, but steady, and lifts the lid. Inside, the scent of old wood and lavender sachet rises, along with the whisper of decades. Her fingers hover over folded quilts and faded holiday cards before landing on a thick, cloth-bound ledger. It's navy blue, frayed at the edges, corners bent from use. Beneath it, tucked in a manila envelope, are a handful of brittle documents: deeds, plat maps, old tax receipts. Paper that doesn't flinch when someone calls your life a prime lot. She sets the bundle gently on the bed. At the back of the ledger, an envelope marked in her late husband Frank's handwriting catches her eye. E.C. Keep with the land papers. Her breath stills as she opens it. Inside, a single sheet, written in his square, all caps script. If the field ever becomes contested, don't let them split it. The East Ridge holds the runoff. Keep it whole. Protect it if you can. Evelyn reads it twice. Then she lays it flat, smoothing it out with the back of her hand like it's something sacred. Maybe it is. She doesn't hear Sophie until she knocks lightly, then pushes the door halfway open. Grandma? Evelyn doesn't look up. Come in. Sophie steps inside, glancing down at the bed. The documents, the ledger, the open letter. Her voice is quiet. I figured you might be in here. Evelyn finally meets her eyes. Do you know what this is? Sophie nods, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. The book you used to keep everything in. I remember when you let me flip through it when I was little. I thought it was some kind of treasure map. Evelyn smiles faintly. Not far off. She reaches for a yellow legal pad on the nightstand and begins scribbling. Column headings in a tight, efficient hand: tax history, liens, title transfers, field easement. Sophie watches, then says gently, We could check the county records online. Evelyn pauses. They'd be in Robert Lane's office, wouldn't they? Yeah. Recorder's office uses a cloud index now. I could pull up whatever's public. Evelyn nods, adding one more note beneath her list. Check mortgage activity. There's a small shuffle in the hallway. Then a shadow spills across the floor as Michael appears in the doorway, leaning lazily against the frame. Well, he says, looking pointedly at the stack of papers. Digging up ghosts? Evelyn closes the ledger in one motion, calm, unbothered. Sorting old things. Nothing you need. Michael's jaw twitches, just slightly, before he forces a smile. Sure. Just don't get too nostalgic, Mom. Things change. He walks off, his footsteps heading back toward the kitchen. Sophie looks at her grandmother. Do you want me to pull the parcel number now? Evelyn thinks for a long moment, then nods. Just be discreet. No search history that ties back to your account. Use the lab's Wi-Fi next time you're on campus. Sophie raises an eyebrow. You want me to go full private investigator? Evelyn glances at the closed ledger. I want to know exactly what they're thinking they can take. Sophie pulls out her phone but doesn't open it yet. This might get messy. Evelyn reaches for her husband's note again and folds it neatly back into the envelope. Then, softly, almost to herself, let's make sure no one is writing our story without us. The kitchen smells faintly of lemon oil and wood polish, an illusion of order Evelyn has kept alive for decades. Morning light glances off the tiled counter as Sophie sits hunched over her laptop, a steaming mug of coffee at her elbow. Evelyn stands near the window, her arms folded. Her posture isn't angry, just contained. Found it, Sophie says, not looking up. Her tone is flat, professional. Evelyn walks over slowly, her eyes scanning the screen. There it is. The property index listing for the parcel. Her land. There's no recorded mortgage yet, no lien officially attached. But below it, a digital notation that curls Sophie's lip. Pending inquiry. Preliminary instrument review, lending institution, Westridge Home Credit Name Associated, Michael Carter. Status, under initial review. Evelyn breathes once, then picks up the phone. Calling Robert? Sophie asks. Evelyn nods. He'll be honest if he can. The phone rings only twice before Robert Lane's warm, gravel-edged voice answers. Hudson County Recorder's Office, this is Robert. Robert, it's Evelyn Carter. A pause, then a friendly chuckle. Well, I'll be. How's the garden? Still green. Listen, I need to ask about something that came across your system. Let me guess, he says, tone shifting subtly. Parcel ending in 7723? Evelyn closes her eyes for a beat. That's the one. Robert sighs. Yeah, we got a preliminary title pull and lien check request through one of the regional lenders. Nothing's recorded. No deed of trust, no grant deed, no quitclaim, nothing binding. But something's cooking. Michael Carter, Evelyn says. Another pause. That's the name they used. From the hallway, a creak of a floorboard, a whisper of movement. Michael's silhouette emerges, towel over his shoulder, half pretending not to listen. Robert, Evelyn continues, her voice steady. Would you be willing to call me personally if anything else hits that parcel? You want to watch on it? He asks. Quietly. I'll keep an eye, Evie, he says, softer now. Been through worse on this block. You're not the first parent to get played by their own blood. Michael strolls into the kitchen with exaggerated casualness, stretching his arms. Morning, ladies, he says brightly, eyeing the phone in Evelyn's hand. Everything okay? Evelyn doesn't answer. She ends the call with a small press of her thumb. Michael raises an eyebrow. Something you want to share? Sophie spins the laptop toward him. You want to explain why your name is on a mortgage inquiry for Grandma's land? Michael gives a short laugh, like it's all been a misunderstanding. Jesus, Sophie, it's not a big deal. I was just exploring options, seeing what kind of financing might be available for improvements. Evelyn watches him carefully. Improvements? Yeah, he says, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. You know, clean the place up. Roof work, drainage, maybe even energy upgrades. Just prepping for... He cuts himself off. Sophie finishes for him. For resale? He grins too quickly. You two really think I'd do anything shady? We think you'd do whatever you think you could get away with, Sophie snaps, before softening at the sight of Evelyn's face. Laura walks in, barefoot, scrolling her phone. This again? I told you it was a renovation inquiry. We're just doing some financial planning. Evelyn, no one's trying to hurt you. Evelyn gives her a look that could slice drywall. Interesting that planning starts with a lender, Evelyn says quietly, before it starts with a conversation. Laura shrugs. We figured you'd come around. Michael pours his water, unfazed. We just didn't want to get your hopes up before anything was real. Evelyn walks back to the counter, lifts a small notebook, and writes something down. Sophie doesn't have to look. She knows it's the name of the lender. Michael moves to glance at the screen again, but Sophie snaps the laptop closed. We're done here, she says. Evelyn turns to him one last time, her voice soft but sharpened at the edges. You should be careful with assumptions, Michael. They don't always age well. The cordless phone feels heavier in Evelyn's hand than it used to. Maybe it's the weight of what she's about to do. Or maybe she's just done pretending this is going to pass. She steps out onto the screened-in porch, away from the kitchen where Michael's voice is still drifting upward, loud and easy. He thinks the conversation's over. He always thinks that. Sophie follows, stopping at the doorway. You okay? Evelyn nods once. I just need to speak to someone who remembers who I used to be before I became just the house. She dials a number she hasn't called in years but never forgot. 3 rings. Then, Claire Dawson speaking. Evelyn exhales. It's Evelyn Carter. A pause. Recognition blooms immediately. Evie. My God, it's been what, 5 years? You still keeping that field of yours like a cathedral? Evelyn closes her eyes. Trying to. Claire, I'm thinking of changing course. There's a subtle shift on the other end. Claire's voice drops half an octave. Tell me what's going on. I'm not ready to tell the whole story yet. But I need options. Clean ones. Fast. Claire doesn't hesitate. Okay. Immediate title protection through a trust or corporate veil. Or, if you're ready, a sale to someone with conservation or nonprofit protections in place. Evelyn's voice firms. Speed and confidentiality? Both doable. I've handled legacy land parcels before. Quiet buyers exist, especially for property with environmental interest or sentimental value. We don't have to put a sign in the yard. From inside the house, the back door clicks. Evelyn turns slightly and sees Michael stepping out onto the patio, pretending to stretch, watching her like he's not. I don't want my name on a new headline, Evelyn says into the phone. Claire replies gently, then let's start with quiet paperwork and real leverage. Sophie edges closer, listening now. Her eyes flick toward Michael, who leans on the railing like a cat pretending not to stalk. He can't hear the call, but he's clocking every tone, every look. Claire continues. Do you want to retain the residence or move? I want to retain my life and decide what happens when it ends. A beat of silence. Then Claire says, that can be arranged. I'll prep 2 possibilities. A revocable trust with transfer protections or a direct sale to an entity you control. Evelyn leans her elbow against the porch post. Could you line up bidders who aren't looking to profit? Absolutely, Claire replies. I've worked with a few regional land conservancies and a community trust group in Rhinebeck. If you want values to matter more than price, I can make that list. Sophie's eyebrows lift slightly. She hadn't expected that kind of network. Michael shifts again, now obviously trying to hear more. Evelyn says calmly, list it. Quietly. Today. Done, Claire replies. I'll draw up listing terms under the LLC structure. You can review before signing. Evelyn hangs up. Michael finally speaks. You making calls now? What's the strategy? Spooking the family into compliance. Evelyn doesn't answer. She steps past him like wind around a stone. Sophie follows without a word. In the kitchen, Evelyn pulls open a drawer and retrieves the thick manila envelope with the old deeds. She lays it on the counter next to her coffee, then looks out the window at the oak tree. Sophie breaks the silence. Grandma, what exactly did you just do? Evelyn doesn't look away from the window. I've started making peace with the fact that I'll have to outlive them to be heard. The email arrives just after 11:47 p.m. Claire had warned her the packet would come late, easier to process cleanly through the after-hours upload portal without raising eyebrows. Evelyn sits at her desk in the den, a single lamp casting gold across the page as she reads through the final documents. Sale of real property to Hearthstone Holdings, LLC, filed under Managing Trust, the Carter Revocable Trust, Trustee of Record. Evelyn M. Carter, Life Estate Reservation. Confirmed. She signed slowly, deliberately, not trembling, not triumphing either, just certain. Claire had structured it perfectly. Hearthstone Holdings was registered out of Albany, but its sole manager was the trust Evelyn had quietly formed 3 months earlier. No ads, no listings, no for sale sign ever touched the front lawn. Once the digital documents are returned, Claire takes the baton. By 3:18 a.m., Robert Lane receives the e-filed deed transfer and clean title packet. At 7:42 a.m., the county system updates the parcel's ownership records. By 9:06 a.m., Michael is standing in the kitchen barefoot, holding his phone, blinking. "What the hell is Hearthstone Holdings?" he mutters, scrolling. "Why is it listed under our property tax account?" Laura, sitting at the island with her usual protein shake and aggressively perfect manicure, leans over. "Show me." Michael spins the screen toward her. It's the property viewer interface from the county's online portal. Parcel 7723 now lists Hearthstone Holdings LLC as the current taxpayer and contact address. Not Evelyn Carter. Laura's face hardens. That's not just a title transfer, that's a sale. Michael storms out to the back porch. "Mom!" Evelyn is in the yard, raking leaves under the massive oak tree, calm. Headscarf tied neatly, sweater sleeves pushed up. She doesn't look up as he approaches. "You sold it?" Michael's voice rises. "You sold the property? Without telling us?" She lifts another small pile of crisp golden leaves, drops them into a wheelbarrow. "I retained a life estate. I'll live here until I don't. The beneficial ownership is just redistributed." "What the hell does that even mean?" Sophie walks outside from the side gate, Tom Reynolds trailing behind her with gloves in one hand and pruning shears in the other. They both stop when they see Michael's face. Tom tilts his head. "Everything all right?" Michael turns on him. "Did you know about this?" Tom lifts his hands. "I mow grass, Mike, not contracts." But his eyes slide toward Evelyn, and there's a flicker of something like admiration. "Didn't think you had it in you," he says to her with a quiet chuckle. "Nice and clean, that's the way." Laura comes flying out of the house. "You went behind our backs. After everything we've done around here? This was supposed to be part of the family's future." Evelyn finally stops raking. She leans on the handle, glances at both of them, then speaks evenly. "You two saw dirt and cash. I saw legacy. We were never speaking the same language." Michael looks physically sick. "Is this some kind of revenge? For not asking nicely enough? For having plans?" "You assumed I'd die before you ran out of money," Evelyn replies, matter of fact. Sophie flinches. Tom whistles softly. Laura shakes her head. "This isn't over." Evelyn returns to her raking. "It is, if you're asking me." The light is soft through the dining room window, catching the edge of Evelyn's teacup as she lifts it to her lips. Outside, the front yard is washed in early fall gold, warm leaves scattered like confetti across the gravel drive. The kind of morning that used to feel peaceful. Not today. Inside the kitchen, Laura's voice rises like a siren. "Unbelievable. Look at this, Michael. Look at what she's done." She's standing in front of her phone, screen angled toward the sunlight as she types with furious precision. She isn't shouting exactly. Not yet. But her tone is charged, sharp with betrayal, and the entitlement of someone who's been blindsided. "Are you seriously posting that?" Michael asks from the table, scrolling through a browser window with growing agitation. "I'm documenting what she did to us," Laura snaps. "People deserve to know." Within seconds, her post goes live. The image is a blurry screenshot of the county assessor's online record, parcel ID, updated ownership, the Hearthstone Holdings LLC listing clearly visible. The caption is venom, wrapped in hashtags. "My mother-in-law sold the family home out from under us. After all we did. After everything we built here. Sold out. Family fraud. Saw betrayed in my own house." It takes less than 20 minutes for the first few likes and comments to roll in. A cousin from Long Island, one of Laura's yoga friends, someone from the PTA who barely remembers Evelyn but loves the drama. Michael doesn't say anything at first. He just keeps refreshing the property site, watching the numbers and details that used to belong to his future drift further away. Eventually, he throws his phone down and gets up from the table. She thinks she's clever, but we'll see how clever she is when this gets to court. Out on the porch, Sophie is crouched beside her laptop, uploading scanned documents into a locked cloud folder. The pages spread across the small patio table like the blueprint of a trap that just snapped shut. Deed transfer, trust certificate, LLC filing, notarized affidavit of ownership. Each one neatly labeled, dated, and bookmarked. She covered every base, Sophie murmurs, more to herself than anyone else. Chain of title is clean, registered overnight, no contingencies, no recorded conditions. She didn't just outmaneuver them, she erased their hand from the board. Tom Reynolds walks through the side gate a few minutes later, garden gloves in his back pocket and a bundled rake slung over his shoulder. He pauses when he sees Sophie at the table, Evelyn pruning the low boxwood hedge nearby. "You good?" he asks, nodding toward the house. "They look like they're prepping for a funeral." Evelyn doesn't look up. Their idea of mourning is mostly performance. Tom smiles, but only a little. "Hell of a performance," he mutters. "You've got half the neighborhood whispering." "Someone even asked me if you'd gone senile." Sophie glances up sharply, but Evelyn just snips a final branch and sets the shears down gently. "I've gone deliberate," she says. "Let them catch up." Just after noon, the landline rings. Sophie answers, but the voice on the other end asks for Evelyn. "It's someone from a bank," she says, handing the phone over. Evelyn's fingers close around the receiver. "This is Evelyn Carter." The caller's voice is male, young, and hesitant. The kind of tone people use when they know they shouldn't be making the call. "I'm calling off record," he says. "I work in underwriting at Hudson State Bank. Just thought you might want to know. Michael Carter listed your parcel in a speculative collateral package. He didn't name you directly, but your address was part of the equity projection. That's why the lien search was triggered last week." "I see," Evelyn replies. "We declined the package this morning," the man adds, "after the new deed went through. Just be careful if he tries again." "I am being careful," she says. "Thank you." That evening, as the sun drips low and gold across the horizon, Evelyn gets one more call, this time from Mark Ellis. "We need to formalize the trust minutes now that the transfer's complete," he says. "You're the managing trustee of record, but we need it down in ink. I'd also like to confirm your banking appointments before Michael makes any noise in that direction." "Tomorrow morning," Evelyn says. "Hudson State? Branch opens at 9. Bring your ID, your trust papers, and that look you get when you want the whole room to sit up straight." She almost laughs. "I used to call that my teacher face. And now it's your executor face." The courthouse fax machine spits out the petition at 8:53 a.m., marked urgent across the top in red ink. A junior clerk glances at the first line, eyes widening just enough to raise her eyebrows. By 9:07, a copy sits on Judge Halpern's desk. Michael's name is typed cleanly across the top, filed through Dawson and Fielding LLP, a small but aggressive local firm known more for noise than nuance. The petition is 6 pages long, accusatory, forceful, lacking subtlety. It opens with the allegation that Evelyn Carter, age 74, recently underwent a notable decline in mental capacity and may have been subject to undue influence in the disposition of real property valued at over $750,000. Cited among the petition's supporting exhibits, a single urgent care visit for dizziness in June, a vague statement about confusion from a neighbor quoted out of context, an unsigned letter from Michael claiming Evelyn was manipulated by third parties acting in their own financial interest, the final request, an emergency injunction, immediate freeze on the Hearthstone Holdings LLC account, nullification of any transactions pending court review. Mark Ellis receives the scanned petition within the hour. He doesn't even bother to sit before calling Evelyn. "They filed it," he says, flipping pages. They're leaning hard on the confused elder angle. Claims of coercion. Laura's name isn't on the paperwork, but I can smell her tone all over it. Evelyn is out back, hands in the soil, a pair of well-worn gloves folded neatly beside her. The late morning sun warms the garden, and she's halfway through pruning the center rose bed when her phone vibrates in her apron pocket. I figured this was coming, she says, standing and brushing off her hands. Did they request an injunction? They did, Mark confirms. We've got 72 hours before the hearing. I'll file opposition today. Full trust documents, execution timeline, capacity records. I'll also submit affidavits. Claire's already agreed to sign one. Tom, too. Evelyn's voice is calm, but her fingers are steady as she picks up the shears again. Good. Get it on the record while the story's still straight. Mark clicks his pen in the background. They'll push every ageist card they've got, Evelyn. They're going to say you were confused, that you were manipulated, that you didn't understand the structure of the deal. I taught real estate law electives for 5 years, Evelyn says, snipping another rose with precision. They're welcome to try. Sophie hears the tail end of the call as she steps onto the porch with a glass of water in one hand and a file folder in the other. Her face is already tense. Mark. Evelyn nods and ends the call, accepting the folder. What is it? She asks. Service documents, Sophie replies. They served me this morning. I'm listed as a known participant and witness to the disputed transaction. Evelyn flips through the pages, her expression unreadable. They're hoping to use you against me. Well, they're out of luck, Sophie says, sitting down beside her. I've already typed a full statement. Dates, conversations, screenshots of the digital records I pulled, and I've got backup copies in 3 cloud folders in case they try anything cute. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The roses sway lightly in the breeze, heads tilted toward the sun like they don't care what's being filed in courtrooms or whispered behind backs. They think they're going to shame you into surrender, Sophie says finally, like you're just supposed to sit down and let them clean your bones for profit. Evelyn clips one last branch and lays it gently in the basket. I've lived in this house longer than they've been alive. I've buried 2 dogs, 1 husband, and half my illusions out here. I don't scare easy. Later that day, Mark files his formal response. Attached are notarized affidavits from Claire Dawson and Tom Reynolds. Medical records from Evelyn's physician confirm her cognitive clarity and decisional capacity on the date of the transaction. The trust documents are pristine. The timeline matches. The ink is dry. The judge sets the hearing for Friday morning and grants a temporary stay. Not a freeze, but a review window. Michael and Laura have 3 days to make their case. Evelyn has 3 days to finish sharpening hers. The morning before the hearing is overcast, the kind of gray sky that dulls the edges of everything. Colors, voices, nerves. Inside Evelyn's dining room, the long oak table has transformed into a war table. Files are stacked in neat rows. Manila folders labeled in blue ink, trust instrument, LLC articles, deed transfer, bank communications, medical records. Mark Ellis moves between the chairs like a professor before a lecture, jacket slung over one arm, eyes narrowed as he checks and rechecks the supporting materials. The air smells faintly of black coffee and highlighters. We'll keep the presentation short and organized, he says, tapping a yellow legal pad. Judge Halpern likes chronology. We'll walk through it in order. Trust creation, LLC registration, property transfer, funding, deed recordation. Evelyn nods. She's seated calmly at the head of the table, cardigan buttoned, reading glasses perched low on her nose. She's not rattled, but the stillness in her face has a kind of density to it, like all the pressure is inward now, contained but active. Sophie stands beside the sideboard, scrolling through a shared document on her tablet. The scanned receipts from the wire transfer cleared the timestamp verification. Claire's signature lines up across the brokerage account. Good, Mark says. I don't want a single line in this file that can be poked. He steps back as Claire Dawson enters the room, dressed in a charcoal gray pantsuit with no jewelry except for a simple wedding band. Her eyes are alert but kind as she sets down a folder and removes a single notarized page. This is my affidavit, she says, outlines the confidentiality agreement, private listing strategy, and the timeline of Evelyn's request. I included language about her clarity and control throughout the process. Perfect, Mark replies, accepting the document and slotting it into the master binder. Tom arrives a few minutes later, still in his work shirt and jeans, smelling faintly of pine mulch. He's less formal, but no less serious. His signature is already inked on the witness statement in his hand. This one's straight, he says, passing it over. Confirms I heard Michael talking about clearing the lot for resale and laughing about how she'd be gone soon anyway. You know, just in case the court wonders if there was a little too much imagination behind his financial projections. Appreciate you, Tom, Evelyn says softly. He tips his head. Just calling it like I heard it. As they file out one by one, the house goes quiet again. Sophie lingers behind, pacing slowly between the table and the window. She holds a printed copy of her own written statement. 2 pages, typed in 12-point serif font, carefully edited to sound like someone older than 21 but no less truthful. You want to go over your part? Evelyn asks, glancing up. Sophie nods. I think I've got it. But if they ask about intent, why I helped you scan things, why I accessed the parcel viewer, what should I say? Evelyn thinks for a long moment before answering. Tell the truth, she says. Tell them you believed I was protecting something worth keeping whole, that I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to stop being erased. Sophie swallows and looks down at her paper. I can do that. That evening, Evelyn rehearses her own statement. She reads aloud from a few handwritten note cards in front of the mirror. Her voice is steady, unhurried. There's no righteous fury in her delivery, just the quiet conviction of someone who has lived long enough to know that being reasonable doesn't mean being weak. My name is Evelyn Carter. I am of sound mind. I have spent my life building something here, not just in land or property, but in values. The actions I've taken were legal, intentional, and mine. She folds the card slowly, placing it into a leather folio with the rest of her documents. Later that night, Laura posts another message online, this one far sharper than the last. You can fake paperwork, you can even buy silence. But some things deserve to be exposed. She tags it with new hashtags. Gyar greedy elders, court battle incoming, sight we will be heard. By midnight, it's already been reshared 17 times. The courtroom is not grand. It's the kind of modest county hearing room with too much beige and not enough ventilation, tucked on the second floor of the courthouse above the clerk's office and across the hall from the dusty archives room. The walls are paneled in tired wood, and the fluorescent lights hum faintly overhead, adding a sharp edge to the air. Evelyn sits at the respondent's table beside Mark Ellis, hands folded neatly atop her leather folio, the same one she used to carry into school board meetings decades ago. Her cardigan is pressed, her shoes polished. She looks like a woman who's walked through storms and come out carrying her own umbrella. Across the aisle, Michael sits with his attorney, a young associate from Dawson and Fielding who looks barely old enough to rent a car. Laura is one row back, wearing sunglasses indoors, her phone silenced, but close enough to vibrate against her palm every few minutes. The courtroom is thinly populated, just a few curious locals, and one man from the community paper scribbling notes. The judge, Honor Lillian Halpern, enters without ceremony. She's in her 60s, with sharp cheekbones and sharper instincts. She glances at both tables, then straightens her glasses. "We're here this morning on Carter v. Carter, docket 4429C, she says. Petitioner seeks temporary relief pending review of asset transfer involving the property at 1325 Hillridge Road. Michael's attorney rises, launching into a clipped and breathless argument that paints Evelyn as a confused elder, manipulated by opportunistic third parties. They reference her urgent care visit, her age, and her sudden, suspicious transfer of the property into an LLC without family input. It's a predictable strategy, and not particularly elegant. She was pressured, the attorney claims, gesturing toward Evelyn. The transaction was rushed, secretive, and possibly fraudulent. We are simply asking the court to pause any further action until we can fully evaluate her capacity and the legitimacy of this transfer. Mark doesn't stand right away. He waits. He lets the silence settle before rising with a slow, measured pace. When he speaks, his voice carries none of the anxiety of the other side, just clarity. "We've submitted into the record a full documentary trail," he begins. "A properly structured revocable trust, a lawfully formed LLC, a notarized deed, time-stamped banking records, a medical clearance from her attending physician, affidavits from the real estate broker, the landscaper, and Ms. Carter's granddaughter, all confirming her decisional clarity and intent at the time of execution." Judge Halpern flips through the binder. She nods once, then pauses. "Ms. Dawson, you're the broker of record?" Claire, seated behind Evelyn, stands. "Yes, Your Honor." "You submitted a marketing statement into evidence?" "I did," Claire replies. "It includes language on confidentiality, Evelyn's original request, and disclosure protocols." Halpern studies her a moment longer. "You included an addendum this morning?" "I did. It regards a conservation easement placed on the property's rear acreage." Michael's attorney stiffens. Mark raises an eyebrow. "If I may, Your Honor, we hadn't discussed this in depth during prep, but the detail is relevant. Claire, you may proceed." Claire steps forward, producing a slender folder. "The undeveloped rear 2 acres of the Hill Ridge parcel were placed under a permanent conservation easement in 2005 by the Hudson Valley Community Land Trust. Evelyn authorized it as part of a civic program she supported during a county planning campaign." The judge blinks. "The parcel is encumbered?" "Legally and permanently," Claire confirms. "It cannot be subdivided, commercially developed, or flipped for high-density housing. It was recorded with full consent. The agreement limits speculative value." Michael sits forward, suddenly alert. His expression fractures just slightly. Mark adds, "This means the property's development potential, its speculative loan value, is, and has long been, significantly limited. Any attempts to borrow against that future value were, at best, misguided." The judge looks directly at Michael now. "Mr. Carter, were you aware of this easement?" Michael hesitates. "No, ma'am." "Yet you attempted to list the property's projected value as collateral in a financing inquiry?" He doesn't answer. Laura exhales sharply behind him. After a long pause, Judge Halpern closes the binder. "This court finds no evidence of coercion or confusion in the transfer of the Hill Ridge Road property. The documents are valid. The trust is sound. The LLC is legitimate and has not acted outside the scope of its authority. The motion for injunctive relief is denied." She taps her gavel once. Firm. Final. Michael doesn't move. Evelyn doesn't smile, doesn't flinch. She just folds her hands again and watches the order being signed. The sun is low by the time Evelyn and Claire sit across from one another at the small conference table in Claire's real estate office downtown. The blinds are pulled halfway, and the room has the soft hush of a place where major decisions are made without raised voices. Claire slides a printed proposal across the table. It's from the Hudson Valley Community Land Trust. They're offering to buy the remainder interest in the parcel, the land minus your life estate. You'd stay here until you choose to leave or pass. And after that, it would shift into their stewardship plan. Evelyn runs her hand over the top sheet, feeling the faint texture of the linen paper. Her eyes move slowly over the numbers and the bullet points. Community garden, pollinator restoration, walking trail for seniors, a stewardship fund for maintenance and education programs. It's the kind of language Evelyn used to write herself, back when she chaired the board of the public library. They've been circling the parcel for years, Claire says gently, not pressuring, just watching. Your trust structure gave them a path. Now they're making a formal offer. Evelyn nods, not responding yet. She sits with the silence, letting the shape of the plan unfold in her mind. The house remains hers. The garden remains hers. But everything else, the earth under the ragweed, the ridge where deer sometimes graze at dusk, that becomes something larger. Michael's going to lose his mind, Sophie says from the doorway. She leans against the frame, arms crossed, but her tone isn't sarcastic. It's factual, prepared. Michael already lost his mind, Evelyn replies quietly. This just means I'm no longer pretending to leave the door unlocked for him to find it again. Mark, who has joined them at the table, looks up from the tax documents in front of him. The trust gets income from the sale. You remain the income beneficiary, and I'd advise moving the proceeds into a charitable remainder trust. It secures disbursement over time and legally insulates the funds from family challenges. So he couldn't go after it, Evelyn says. Mark nods. Even if he tried, and he would, it would be like chasing smoke through a screen door. Claire watches Evelyn closely. You're making something permanent here, not just protection, but impact. They'd use the rear lot for native restoration. The trail would loop down to the creek. There's even talk of putting in benches with donor plaques. Sophie steps forward, animated now. We could build a student internship program, environmental science credits. I could draft the pilot curriculum. Evelyn looks up at her granddaughter, seeing her not as a child this time, but as a bridge, a voice of continuity. She thinks of all the things she had wanted to pass down, but never had the space or safety to do so, until now. This land raised people, Evelyn says, mostly to herself. It taught things. You don't have to sell off a legacy to make it useful. She stands, smoothing the front of her cardigan, then looks out the window where the last of the late afternoon light is casting long shadows down Main Street. Her voice is clear. This family isn't just a bank account. Behind her, Mark smiles faintly and begins drafting notes for the charitable trust terms. Claire starts assembling the paperwork for the nonprofit offer, flipping through the folder with quiet efficiency. On the sidewalk outside, Laura passes the window. She doesn't see them. She's on her phone, voice raised, walking quickly. Michael follows behind, face flushed, trying to catch up. It's unclear whether they're arguing or coordinating, only that they're now outside the circle entirely. The Hudson Valley Community Center smells faintly of folding chairs, brewed coffee, and the floor polish the janitor uses every Thursday. The overhead lights hum softly as people trickle in. Older couples who've lived in town since Reagan, younger parents who've seen Evelyn at every school board vote and compost fair, teenagers in hoodies dragged in by civic-minded science teachers. By 6 o'clock, the multipurpose room is almost full. There are 2 rows of newsprint signs at the front of the room marked Proposed Land Use Discussion, Parcel Danan 7723. Beneath it, a large printout of the CLT's concept plan, walking trails, restored meadow, public access from the east. Evelyn sits quietly in the second row, hands folded in her lap, a soft wool coat draped over her shoulders. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her presence alone anchors the space like a stone sunk deep into the bedrock of the town's history. Claire stands near the podium, prepping a few documents and maps. Sophie waits beside her, backpack slung over one chair, hand tightly gripping a flash drive with her environmental impact presentation. Mark isn't present. This isn't a courtroom. But his advice rings clearly in Evelyn's ears. Let the town remember who you are. They'll do the rest. At 6:15 p.m., Michael and Laura arrive. Their entrance is unsubtle. Laura in a sleek, city-cut coat. Michael in an untucked collared shirt. Jaw clenched tight. They don't sit near Evelyn. They don't acknowledge her. Instead, they hover near the back of the room, murmuring to a few people they know, flashing forced smiles and hushed intensity. The meeting is called to order by Janice Greer, head of the town planning board. Her voice is brisk but warm. We're here to discuss the proposed sale of remainder interest on the Hill Ridge parcel and the stewardship offer from Hudson Valley CLT. This is a public hearing. All voices welcome, but please, let's keep it respectful. Claire steps forward first. Her delivery is clear, deliberate. She outlines the timeline of Evelyn's decision, the conservation easement, the proposed benefits, environmental education, senior access, public gardens, native species restoration. She speaks with the polish of a professional and the tone of someone personally invested. Then Sophie takes the mic. She speaks softly at first, then stronger as her voice finds rhythm. This isn't just green space, she says. It's an opportunity. For students, for the elderly, for pollinators even. We talk about wanting to protect what makes our community unique. But this is how we do it. We build around legacy. We don't bulldoze it. A beat of silence. Then, applause. Michael stands. I think everyone's forgetting, he says, voice louder than necessary, that this was a family property. And not everyone in the family agreed to this. Not everyone was consulted. Laura adds from the back. And once this is sold, we can't get it back. That's permanent. You're trading generational wealth for a butterfly garden. A few heads nod, but not many. Then Harold Baines, a neighbor from 3 doors down, stands slowly. I remember when Evelyn and Frank built that shed out back with their own hands. I remember when Michael was 14 and smashed my mailbox with a bat. Evelyn came over, made him repaint the whole fence as apology. He's 30 years older now, but I don't think he's grown out of expecting not to be held accountable. A ripple of chuckles spreads. Then Carla Mendel, who ran the food pantry, stands. She's been donating to us quietly for 15 years, never asked for credit. Just showed up with boxes. Evelyn doesn't grandstand. She just acts. And what she's doing now? That's not betrayal. That's consistency. More nods. A few claps. Someone expresses concern about housing supply. Will the protected parcel limit development? A representative from the CLT answers, we're protecting what cannot be developed without infrastructure we don't have. This isn't about housing units. It's about future access to clean land, air, and community space. By the end of the hour, Janice calls for a public endorsement vote. It's not binding, but symbolic. 87 hands rise in favor. 4 abstain. 2. Michael and Laura vote against. Michael looks around as if he's just woken up in a room that no longer wants him. It begins the way most storms do now, with a shaky vertical video and an unfiltered caption. Laura's voice cuts through the hum of Facebook Live, shaky but urgent, her tone half tears, half testimony. The camera isn't steady. It swivels as she walks up the gravel road near the parcel, breathless with performative grief. She sold out the family, Laura says, pointing toward the property line. She sold it while we were still in the house. No notice, no discussion. This was meant to be passed down, not parceled out like a clearance sale for tree huggers. The comment section catches fire before the second minute. Sarah Lawton. OMG. This is elder abuse in reverse fix-up, Dad. She looks totally sane to me. This is a family problem, not public. Coach Paul, 53, knew that woman was cold. Never let my kid cut through her yard. By evening, the clip has been reshared nearly 1,300 times, mostly by people with only partial context and a full appetite for drama. The hashtag swell. Stolen legacy. Justice for family. Land. Sought. Elder outrage. At Claire's office the next morning, Mark leans back in the conference chair, rubbing his temple with slow circles. Claire, arms crossed, stares at the iPad on the table. The video paused mid-rant. "We do not respond," Mark says flatly. "We do not issue statements. We do not dignify a tantrum with oxygen." Claire exhales. Even if the tantrum's gone viral? Especially then. Evelyn, seated at the far end of the table, lifts her teacup without a word. The storm is roaring now, but it's outside the walls. Sophie walks in, holding a thumb drive in one hand and her laptop in the other. "I've collected 42 letters," she announces, "all from residents, handwritten and emailed, teachers, veterans, volunteers. Most of them include statements about Grandma's years of service, and some talk about what open land means to them personally." She opens the laptop and plugs in, uploading them to the nonprofit portal. "Claire, can you share the link with the Land Trust's board chair?" "On it," Claire replies, already reaching for her phone. Evelyn sets her cup down. "Let the storm chase itself. We've got roots. They've got static." Across town, Robert Lane leans against the counter of the county recorder's office, sipping weak coffee. He watches the fuss roll across social media with a skeptical eye and a tired heart. Around noon, he prints one copy of the recorded deed confirmation, the transfer from Evelyn Carter to Hearthstone Holdings LLC, stamped, filed, and fully executed weeks ago. Then, quietly, he forwards the document to Elise Chen at the Hudson Gazette, along with a short note. "If you're covering this, you might want the facts," and a reminder of the garden tour Evelyn ran for the Historical Society in 2009. She hasn't changed. The audience has. 2 days later, the Gazette runs a Sunday feature, "The Steward of Hillridge, Evelyn Carter and the Quiet Power of Legacy." Beneath the headline is a photo of Evelyn standing in her garden, backlit by sun, holding a pair of pruning shears with a face that neither apologizes nor explains. The article is gentle, detailed, and resolutely one-sided in Evelyn's favor. Local shares flood in, and more importantly, comments shift. Maddie Patch. "Oh wait, she did this legally and protected it for the community?" Langley. "Hi Mom. I remember her tutoring my son after school. Evelyn's the real deal." Blue Silo Studio. "We need more people like this, not fewer." Meanwhile, at a dusty renovation site off Route 12, Michael gets a text while reviewing a bid package. The screen lights up with one line, "Your proposal's been pulled. Concerns raised about reputation and ethics. Not moving forward." He stares at the message, thumb hovering over reply. He doesn't respond. Behind him, Laura slams a car door. "They're making her into a saint now," she snaps. "They're turning her into folklore." Michael doesn't answer. He's looking at the parcel map again. Or maybe just through it. Back on Hillridge Road, Evelyn sits on her porch beneath the oak. The wind carries faint traces of wood smoke and distant voices. Sophie brings out a fresh cup of tea, sets it beside her. Neither of them speaks for a long moment. Then Evelyn says, without looking away from the sky, "Sometimes the best kind of noise is the kind that doesn't ask you to answer it." She lifts her teacup again. The wind picks up. The hashtags keep spinning. But the house holds still. The title office sits 2 blocks from Main Street, tucked between a stationery shop and a shuttered diner with yellowed "For Lease" signs taped crooked in its windows. It smells like toner and lemon cleaner, the way all institutional places do when they're preparing to turn something intangible, like land or legacy, into paperwork. Inside, the closing room is lit by a bank of low-hanging fluorescents. There are no windows, just a polished table, a long strip of gray carpet, and a brass notary seal resting beside a glass of stale water. Evelyn arrives precisely at 9:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the appointment. Claire is already there, crisp in a navy suit, reviewing the settlement statement with a highlighter. Mark follows close behind, flipping through a bound folder as he walks, murmuring figures under his breath. Sophie holds the door, her eyes red from something she won't admit was crying. At the far end of the room sits a representative from Hudson Valley CLT, young, cordial, wears a wool tie and a pin in the shape of a sapling. The nonprofit's check is already printed, sitting inside a plain envelope. The mood is hushed, respectful. No one says anything frivolous. Evelyn removes her coat, smooths her collar, and sits. Claire slides the final packet toward her, page after page marked with sticky flags. Sign here, date here, initial. This transfer, Claire explained softly, is for the remainder interest only. The life estate is retained. The home is yours. Everything else will be placed in perpetual stewardship per your instruction. Evelyn nods. No hesitation. Mark opens his binder and points. Per our structuring, the purchase proceeds flow directly into a charitable remainder trust. You remain the income beneficiary for life. Upon passing, the corpus splits, part to support your designated elder care fund and part to fund free legal aid for seniors in Hudson County. He glances up. And just to be thorough, we've included clause language preventing any former family member from petitioning the trust without cause or breach. Sophie's hand tightens on the edge of the table. Evelyn lifts the pen slowly. There's no tremble in her fingers now, just quiet resolve. With deliberate care, she signs. One page, then another. Then the final declaration, dated, notarized, and witnessed. Across the table, the CLT representative offers a quiet smile. Congratulations! This parcel is now one of the largest protected green spaces in the township. It will never be sold again. Evelyn nods once. That was the point. Back on Hillridge Road, Michael sits behind the wheel of his truck, engine idling, documents spread across the passenger seat. He's read the closing memo twice. The nonprofit's acquisition, the trust breakdown, the permanent restrictions. The part that sticks in his throat is one paragraph, plain and brutal. Disbursements from the charitable remainder trust are restricted to the designated income beneficiary and subject to irrevocable gift tax treatment. No disbursements may be claimed by non-beneficiaries without lawful breach or death of trustee. His future was paper, and Evelyn turned it to stone. Across the dash, Laura slams the glove box shut and tosses her phone aside. She made you look like a greedy joke, she snaps, and now they're talking civil action. Slander, harassment, maybe even fraud depending on what the court finds on your filings. Michael doesn't answer. He just stares straight ahead. His face is unreadable, but his hands grip the steering wheel like they're trying to crush it into confession. Back in the title office, Claire finishes gathering the executed pages and slides a small envelope across the table toward Evelyn. Inside is a simple frame. No photograph. Just an antique-style survey plat map of the Hillridge parcel, outlined in green, the acreage labeled Protected by Civic Covenant 2025. Below it, in tiny lettering, dedicated by Evelyn Carter, steward, not seller. Evelyn holds it for a long time. Sophie steps behind her and leans in. You did it. Evelyn gives a small, quiet laugh. No, we did it. I just wrote it down first. She stands. The room is quiet as they collect their coats. Mark tucks the trust documents into a leather folio. Claire texts the courier to pick up filings for the recorder's office, and Sophie, still holding her laptop, blinks quickly and wipes at her cheek with the back of her hand. Don't, she whispers to herself, and Evelyn gently links their arms. Outside, the wind picks up. There's the scent of rain in the air. But no clouds yet, just the promise of something changing. And for once, Evelyn doesn't brace against it. She walks out knowing the deed was done, and who it was done for. The Monday after the closing, Michael's name disappears from two contractor shortlists. The first is a mid-scale renovation on Route 47. Nothing major, just a civic center refresh with modest state funds. But the town board votes to pause the contract, citing integrity concerns. No one uses Evelyn's name. They don't have to. The second is more painful. A private housing co-op in Pine Hollow drops his proposal altogether. They forward an article from the Hudson Gazette as rationale. One sentence is underlined. Carter's failed petition attempted to undermine a legal trust arrangement designed to preserve community resources. Michael reads it in silence, then throws the packet across the garage. It hits the concrete with a flat, unimpressive thud. At Mark's office, the call from the district attorney's office arrives on a rainy Tuesday morning. It's not formal yet, just preliminary inquiry. But the language is clear. Potential fraud, harassment, and reckless defamation related to a contested estate matter. Mark doesn't flinch. He's already labeled the folders, already scanned the affidavits and notations, already drafted the memo he'll send with the email. He clicks upload, sips his black coffee, and mutters to no one, "File your tantrums carefully, children. Some of them come back stamped." By Thursday, the nonprofit has boots on the ground. Claire walks the rear parcel with the CLT team, clipboard in hand, while a landscape architect takes drone images of the tree line. Sophie tags along, muddy boots and all, pointing out native growths under the goldenrod and flagging areas for potential restoration. "We can reintroduce milkweed here," she says, crouching beside a patch of scrub. "Good for monarchs, good for biodiversity. Maybe even put in an info sign." Claire smiles. "You're really staying on for the project?" "If you'll have me," Sophie replies. "This place means something. Not just to her, to me." They pause at the ridge overlooking the creek. The same view Evelyn once protected with a signature no one saw coming. From here, the property looks like a promise kept. That weekend, Evelyn hosts a small garden party. No invitation, just a quiet mention at the library, a few calls to old friends, and a note on the town board. Tom Reynolds arrives first, carrying a pie and a bottle of elderberry wine someone gave him last winter. He shakes Evelyn's hand like she's done something brave in wartime. Neighbors drift in slowly. The retired nurse who remembers Evelyn volunteering at the free clinic. The young couple who just moved in and wanted to thank the woman who saved the only patch of sky you can still see stars through. Even Carla from the pantry brings homemade cornbread. They eat on paper plates under the oak tree. Evelyn doesn't make speeches. She just listens. And the land listens too. That night, Sophie posts a video from the ridge. It's not dramatic, just her voice. Steady and sincere, layered over clips of butterflies on the boxwoods and wind moving through tall grass. She talks about what it means to steward land without owning it, what it means to listen to older generations not just out of tradition, but out of respect. She includes a soft message at the end. Ask your elders what they'd protect if no one was watching. You might be surprised what they've already done. She doesn't expect much, but by Monday the video has 14,000 shares. A local paper in Connecticut calls to ask if they can reprint her transcript. A high school civics teacher in Colorado messages her, "Mind if I use this in class?" Sophie texts Evelyn the link. Evelyn doesn't reply right away. Instead, she writes 3 notes, handwritten on cream stationery with a small ink stamp in the corner shaped like a lily. The first goes to Mark. For protecting what mattered, not just what could be measured. E. The second to Claire. For seeing more than market value. You gave the plan shape. Evelyn. And the last to Robert Lane. You didn't have to forward that deed. But you did. The quiet kind of help is the rarest. With gratitude, EC. She seals them each in a stamped envelope, places them on the front hall table, and turns off the light. The oak sways gently outside. She's no longer defending the ground. Now, she's just living on it. The meadow opens quietly, without a ribbon cutting or podium. No microphone, no banner. Just the early morning sun spilling down over the old Carter parcel as the first neighbors step past the wooden gate, pausing to take in the hand-carved sign arched above them. Hillridge Meadow. Protected in perpetuity by Civic Covenant and Stewardship Trust, 2025. A gravel path winds gently through restored wild grasses, framed on one side by tall stalks of milkweed and purple coneflower, and on the other by a modest learning garden with rows marked for student use. Small signs dot the edges, etched in bronze: pollinator zone, native edibles, senior access path. ADA compliant. Evelyn doesn't walk the trail on opening day. She sits on her porch, tea in hand, watching from a distance as families stroll past, toddlers in rubber boots pointing at dragonflies, a teenager sketching something near the edge of the woodline. She smiles but doesn't wave. This part was never about her name. But her name is there. Inside the new office of the Hudson Valley Elder Legal Aid Clinic, a modest brass plaque hangs above the front desk. Founded in part by the Evelyn M. Carter Charitable Remainder Trust for those who defended quietly and deserved to be heard. The waiting area smells like cedar and clean paper. A donated bookshelf holds paperbacks and crossword puzzles. They've already taken on 8 pro bono elder fraud cases in the first quarter. The trust funds the paralegal, the rent, and 1 part-time elder rights attorney, just as she asked. Sophie is busier than ever. She's been named a youth fellow at the Community Land Trust, co-leading workshops with new high school interns on field ecology, land preservation, and policy basics. They call her Ms. Carter. Even though she told them not to, she pretends to mind. She doesn't. In one session, she reads them her now viral video transcript and asks, "What would you protect if no one gave you credit?" No one answers immediately. That's fine. Sophie learned that from Evelyn, too. Some truths need time to root. Michael doesn't speak publicly anymore. The mediation with the local prosecutor went poorly. He avoids trial by agreeing to a civil penalty, a 5-figure fine and a formal statement retracting all claims of coercion, along with a non-disparagement clause regarding the trust. Laura is sentenced to 100 hours of supervised community service. She paints fencing on the far side of the public meadow one Saturday afternoon, just 3 feet from a new sign that reads, "Funded by Evelyn Carter's stewardship gift, land, legacy, and legal access for all." She doesn't take a photo. She doesn't speak to Evelyn, who walks by at a distance. She just dips her brush and keeps working. On a warm June evening, Evelyn trims the rose bush beside her porch. She hums something faintly familiar, a tune Frank used to whistle while fixing the old screen door. The air smells like soil and honeysuckle. Somewhere in the distance, kids are laughing. Harold Baines walks by slowly, his old lab trotting along behind him. He stops, leans over the white picket fence and rests his arms on the post like he's done 100 times. "You did right, Evie," he says. Evelyn nods. "Didn't do it alone." Harold smiles. "Still, you made sure it lasted." A pause. Then he tips his cap, clicks his tongue, and the dog follows him down the path. Through the open gate, onto the land that once hung on the edge of someone else's ambition. Later, inside the house, Evelyn picks up the small ledger she once used to track old PTA minutes and parcel budgets. She runs her hand over the leather cover, then closes it. She walks to the mantel and places the framed plat map in the center. its green outline glowing faintly in the evening light. The land is safe now. Her place, restored. She whispers to no one, maybe to the wind. When my son told the landscaper she wouldn't be living here long, he thought he was predicting the future. He didn't know I was rewriting it.